Every explanation you have ever given to someone who did not want to understand you made you smaller. Every time you justified yourself to someone who had already decided what you were, you handed them power you will never fully get back. And every time you talked when you should have stayed silent, you revealed something they will one day use against you. The most dangerous thing you do every single day is not what you keep hidden. It is what you keep giving away with your mouth. Friedrich Nietzsche was one of the most misunderstood minds in human history, rejected in his time, mocked, dismissed. And what did he conclude from a lifetime of not being understood? He did not try harder to explain himself. He went deeper into his solitude. He sharpened his mind further. He wrote more ruthlessly and more honestly than before. He decided that the desperate need to be understood was not a sign of depth. It was a sign of weakness. And if you sit with that for a moment, really sit with it, you will start to feel something uncomfortable shift inside you. Because you have been taught your entire life that communication is connection, that explaining yourself builds trust, that talking things through is how relationships survive. And some of that is true. But there is a version of it, a desperate, compulsive, anxious version, that does not build connection at all. It begs for it. And begging, no matter how elegantly phrased, is still begging. Think of the last time you over-explained yourself. You gave the full backstory. You listed your reasons. You justified the decision, the reaction, the boundary, the choice. You laid your interior world out like evidence in a courtroom, trying to prove to someone that your feelings made sense, that your actions were logical, that you were not the villain they seemed to be casting you as. And what happened? Did they finally understand? Or did they take your explanation, find the one piece they could argue with, and use your own words to unravel your position? This is the trap. The more you explain, the more material you give to those who were never listening to understand, only listening to respond, only listening to find the crack, only listening to confirm what they had already decided about you. Nietzsche understood something radical about silence. He did not see it as absence, he saw it as power, because the person who does not explain themselves cannot be argued out of their position. The person who does not justify every move cannot be manipulated through their own justifications. The person who speaks only when it matters makes every single word land like stone instead of dissolving like noise. There is a kind of person in this world who talks constantly, who fills every silence, who shares every thought the moment it forms, who processes out loud, in public, with anyone who will listen. Watch how people treat them over time, not with reverence, with familiarity, the casual, careless kind, the kind that comes with no respect attached. And then there is another kind of person, the one who listens more than they speak, the one whose opinions you rarely hear. So when they offer one, the entire room slows down. The one who does not explain their decisions, they simply make them and let the results speak. Watch how people treat this person, carefully, curiously, with a kind of unconscious deference that the talker will never earn, no matter how many words they use. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is gravity, and gravity does not explain itself. It simply pulls. Here is the deeper truth Nietzsche forces you to face. The need to be understood, when it becomes compulsive, when it drives you to overshare, when it makes you repeat yourself to people who clearly do not care, is not a need for connection at all. It is a need for approval. It is the child inside you, who was once told that unless you could explain yourself clearly enough, you would not be accepted. So you learned to talk faster, to justify louder, to explain more completely, convinced that if you just found the right words, the right person would finally say, "I understand, you are okay, you are enough." But that moment never comes, not from the outside, not through words, not through any explanation you will ever give. And chasing it, endlessly, exhaustingly chasing it through conversations that leave you drained and still unheard, is one of the most quietly devastating habits a human being can carry. Stop, not because you are not worth understanding, but because you are worth more than the version of yourself that contorts and performs and justifies just to earn the basic dignity of being heard. Nietzsche spoke of the Übermensch, the higher person, the one who has moved beyond the desperate need for the herd's approval. This was not a person who had become cold. This was a person who had become complete enough within themselves that they no longer needed every room to validate them, Not because they stopped caring about people, but because they stopped needing people to agree with them in order to feel real. That is the shift, from needing to be understood to simply being. And when you make that shift, when you stop explaining and start existing, something strange happens. People begin to lean in. They become curious. They start to wonder what is behind the silence. What does this person know that they are not saying? What is driving the calm behind those eyes? What is it about them that does not need my approval to feel whole? Your silence becomes magnetic precisely because it is so rare. In a world where everyone is screaming to be understood, the person who does not beg to be heard stands out like a blade of grass in concrete. Now hear this clearly. This is not about becoming cold. This is not about building walls and calling it wisdom. This is not about becoming the person who never opens up, who treats every conversation like a chess game, who keeps everyone at arm's length and mistakes isolation for power. That is not strength. That is fear in a different costume. What Nietzsche is pointing at is something more precise. Selective depth, knowing when to speak and when to hold. Knowing who has earned the interior of you and who only deserves the surface. Knowing the difference between a conversation and a performance of yourself for people who are not paying real attention. Not everyone who asks how you are deserves the full, honest answer. Not everyone who questions your decision deserves a defense. Not everyone who misunderstands you needs to be corrected. Some misunderstandings are not errors to fix. They are filters. They are the world sorting itself into those who will understand you eventually, on the evidence of your actions and your character, and those who never will, no matter how many words you pour into the space between you. Let the second group be wrong about you. Let them have their version. It costs you nothing except the ego that needed them to see clearly. And your ego, that part of you that flinches when someone gets you wrong, that part that pulls out explanations like weapons, that part that cannot rest until the record is corrected, that is the part that is costing you your power. Every time you argue with someone's wrong opinion of you, you are confirming that their opinion matters enough to argue with. Every time you explain yourself to someone who did not ask in good faith, you are handing them the keys to your composure. Every time you talk when silence would have served you better, you are spending a currency you cannot earn back. Nietzsche did not write for the crowd. He wrote in full knowledge that most people would not understand him. He wrote anyway, not for their comprehension, for his own, for the few who were ready, for the future that had not arrived yet. That is the model, not approval seeking dressed as communication, not performing your interiority for audiences who have not earned the show, but doing the work, saying what needs to be said, remaining silent where silence is power, and trusting, deeply, uncomfortably trusting, that what is real about you will eventually be visible without you having to point at it constantly. The people worth keeping in your life will understand you through your actions, through your consistency, through the quality of how you treat them over time. They will not need a speech. They will not need a defense. They will simply see you. And everyone else, the ones who demand explanations and then argue with the answers, the ones who misread you on purpose and wait for you to correct it, the ones who only ask questions to watch you squirm, they were never going to understand you. Not because you are too complex, but because they were never actually trying to. So stop feeding the performance. Stop auditioning for people who have already made up their minds. Stop spending your most honest words on the least deserving ears. Go quiet, go deep. Let the work speak. Let the life you are building speak. Let the person you are becoming say everything your explanations never could. Because the most powerful sentence you will ever say is the one you chose not to say. And the most devastating version of you is the one that no longer needs to be understood to know exactly who it is.